The sun beat down on the vast Idaho landscape, stretching for miles in every direction. Golden fields, rugged terrain, and the promise of something great. 19-year-old Dylan Rounds stood at the edge of his farm, his boots covered by the dirt he had worked tirelessly to claim as his own. This wasn't just land to him. This was his future. From a young age, Dylan had been drawn to the soil, to the rhythm of farming, the early mornings, the hands-on work, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. He wasn't just another kid with big dreams. He was making them a reality. By 2019, he had done what most people twice his age hadn't: purchased his own property with his grandfather, secured his own equipment, and prepared the ground for his first crop. This wasn't a hobby, it was his way of life. Even at the age of 15, Dylan's relentless work ethic set him apart. While other teenagers were glued to their phones or hanging out with friends, Dylan would be out in the pasture, push mowing in the sweltering 80-degree heat, wearing nothing but a sweatshirt in sheer determination. Farming wasn't just something he did, it was who he was. But behind the dirt-stained jeans and the calloused hands was more than just a hard-working young man. Dylan was kind. He was helpful. If someone needed a hand, he would be there. But in this quiet, unforgiving stretch of Idaho, he was determined to carve out a future, 1 acre at a time. Then, without warning, it was as if Dylan's hopes and dreams stopped in an instant. At just 19 years old, without any sign or explanation, he vanished. One day, he was tending to his farm, working towards the future he had fought so hard to build. The next, he was simply gone. His disappearance set off an alarming panic within his family. They knew something was wrong from the very start. Days turned into weeks, then months, each one filled with unbearable anguish. His parents, desperate for answers, searched tirelessly, scouring the land he loved so much, retracing his usual steps, clinging on to any shred of hope. But nothing made sense. Dylan wasn't the type to leave all of this behind. Farming was his life, his passion. He had plans, crops to plant, a future waiting for him. For him to just vanish, it was unthinkable. Then it was May 28th of 2022, nearly 2 years later, 20 long, agonizing months, their worst fears were confirmed. Dylan's body was discovered on his very own property, buried beneath the same soil he had once nurtured. The land that had been his dream, his sanctuary, had become his grave. But how did this happen? Who was responsible, and why? The answers, like Dylan himself, had disappeared in the vast Idaho landscape. But one thing was certain, someone out there knew the truth, and his family wasn't going to stop until they found it. Hey, Crime Style listeners, I'm Ashley, your host this week. Ricky will not be in this episode, but you will be sure to hear him next week. Now, before we jump in, please make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a Crime Salad episode. Dylan's farm, located in Lucin, Utah, consists of hundreds of remote acres, so a lot of land. And it's actually a part of the Utah desert near the borders of Idaho and Nevada. Now, the last person to hear from Dylan was his grandmother, who received a call from him discussing his farming plans for the day. So that was his plan, farming. Now, when the family reported him missing that spring day in 2022, local police initially dismissed their concerns. They assumed that, well, as a 19-year-old, he might have gone to a party and would likely show up, completely brushing aside the family's concerns, leaving them feeling unsupported during a critical time. And the cops were wrong. He never came home. He never called. Everything was in the same place as he left it. Dylan's mother recounted the long, agonizing days filled with unease as the family were compelled to take his disappearance into their own hands. They were consumed by a deep sense of helplessness, unsure of where to turn next. And they were devastated when law enforcement not only dismissed their concerns, but reportedly laughed at them, a response that was both deeply hurtful and disheartening. Adding to their outrage, the family firmly believes to this day that Dylan's case was grossly mishandled. Despite bringing forward critical findings from their own search efforts, their concerns were brushed aside and not taken seriously. It's heartbreaking to think that the people who knew Dylan best were left in the dark, fighting for answers and justice on their own. However, the tone of the investigation completely shifted dramatically when deputies from the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office made a chilling discovery: a pair of Dylan Round's boots discarded behind a dirt pile on his property. One boot was covered with a blood stain, which, after testing, was confirmed to be a match to Dylan's DNA. Another critical piece of evidence came to light. His cell phone was found. These discoveries left no doubt that foul play was involved, prompting authorities to launch a more thorough and intense investigation into Dylan's disappearance. Thousands of hours were poured into searching and analyzing every lead. A forensic analysis of Dylan's abandoned cell phone was conducted, including investigating location data, examining photos and videos, and reviewing his recent communications, all in hopes of painting a clearer picture of what may have happened to him. While awaiting these results, the search continued to help shape the direction of the case. According to a police press release that shortly followed, it was stated that over 30 different agencies assisted with the investigation. These were agencies in and around Utah. It was an all-hands-on-deck situation. However, Dylan's mother confidently believes that there was no way that was true. She pointed out that the state of Idaho helped to process Dylan's farm equipment, which included his grain truck and his pickup truck, but beyond that, there were maybe 7 or 8 agencies, no more than 10, who assisted. Certainly not 30, which is kind of strange that they would specifically list a number of agencies who were helping. But there's no doubt the stress and the tension that would be involved. I mean, her child is missing. Every detail of this case would be the most important thing to her as a parent. Now, Dylan wasn't the only one living on this property. Living on Dylan's property was an older man named James Brenner. He actually lived in a camper on the property, basically in the middle of nowhere. He was described as someone who was quiet, who just kept to himself, not someone who gave off any strange vibes at all, really, or raised any red flags. He's described as a loner who was seeking a place to live. And this property was ideal for him. Maybe it was for a reason, though, because the family later learned that this guy actually had spent 2 years in federal prison with a criminal history dating back to 1986. Dylan's mom described him as a squatter on the property for about 22 months. He was living in this camper or trailer on Dylan's property, but he didn't seem to pose any harm, so it wasn't considered a big deal. Dylan even paid him to help out around the farm with odd jobs, and both Dylan and his family occasionally offered him food. The Routes family, they were aware of this man, but they didn't interact with him much. The family confronted the police, mentioning that James Brenner, commonly referred to as Jim, had told them that the last time he spoke to Dylan, Dylan had gone to a bar and was bragging about how much money he was making. Which is strange because he's not even 21, so what 19-year-old has any interest in going to a bar? And even Dylan's family felt this was very off and didn't align with Dylan's character at all. James also participated in the investigation, assisting the police with the search and working alongside the family to search the property. Once Dylan's phone was found on the property, along with other things that we mentioned, like his boots with the blood on them, the phone gets investigated, and what was left on the phone was a little more telling. The quiet guy in the trailer living off the grid would appear in one of the videos on Dylan's phone, which became one of the most telling pieces of evidence. The video, it was quick. It was actually a 1-minute time-lapse video, so it's hard to make out what's even happening. But it appears that James Brenner was in this video, blood on his shirt and on his arms, and he's pretty much nonchalantly cleaning off his gun, as if There was mud all over it, but it was blood. And this is the same man who was assisting in this search for Dylan. So naturally, the spotlight directs to James Brenner. But when he's questioned, he puts his hands in the air, acting as if he has no clue to what even happened. They continue to scrutinize him further, and they access things like the shirt that James was wearing in that video, which still had bloodstains on it. And it became a clear match that the blood found on the shirt included the DNA of Dylan Rounds, providing sufficient evidence to pursue charges against Brenner. But it wasn't until nearly 2 years of searching. In April of 2024, James Brenner finally led authorities to Dylan Rounds' skeletal remains as part of a plea agreement. His remains were found on his own property, confirming the family's worst fears. An autopsy revealed that Dylan had been shot twice in the head, and with a chilling video showing Brenner covered in blood while cleaning a gun, it started to be pretty telling. In May of 2024, James Brenner pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, with his original charge of aggravated murder, a capital felony, reduced as part of the plea deal. The charge of discretion of human remains was dismissed. Brenner also pleaded guilty to 2 counts of possession of a firearm by a restricted person. His sentences, ordered to run consecutively, totaled up to 30 years in prison. Now, during sentencing, the judge recommended that Brenner serve as much time as possible. But for Dylan's family, the outcome felt far from justice. Dylan's mother, Candace Cooley, she expressed deep frustration that the plea deal seemed to prioritize Brenner's cooperation over accountability and justice for Dylan. Dylan's father, Justin Rounds, voiced his pain in court, questioning how Brenner could betray Dylan after all the times Dylan had helped him. Yet Brenner showed no remorse. He refused to speak, even when the judge asked him to face the family. In the end, while James Brenner's conviction brings some accountability, it cannot undo the devastation or truly deliver justice for Dylan Rounds. Candace stated publicly that, quote, she's grateful her family finally has some sort of resolution. We were getting ready to plan searches for the summer. Now we don't have to do that. Candace isn't ending her son's legacy there. It's been nearly a year since Dylan Rounds was found in the Utah desert after vanishing without a trace back in May of 2022. He was just 19 years old. Since then, his mother, Candace Cooley, has turned her unimaginable grief into a powerful mission. She's been meeting with lawmakers, pushing for real change, and now she's succeeded. A bill she fought for, Utah's HB 366, is officially becoming a law. So, what does that mean for Utah? If someone goes missing under suspicious or urgent circumstances, whether it's foul play or a dangerous situation in the wilderness, law enforcement can now immediately access phone and location data with a fast-tracked warrant. No more waiting days or weeks. And that kind of time, it can mean the difference between life and death. So if someone is missing, even if it wasn't under foul play, like a hiker or something, and they go missing, you would want the police immediately to use all the tools that they have access to. This should be a law across the country, really. And Candace, she knows this firsthand. Dylan disappeared. It took weeks to access his phone records that ultimately helped lead to the man responsible for his death. His killer, James Brenner, had since pleaded guilty and is now behind bars. So without that video that was found on Dylan's phone, who knows if this would have been a shelved case? This law allows access to things like GPS tracking, call logs, browser history, app data, text messages, emails, even photos and contacts, all of which can be critical when someone is in danger or missing in a remote area. And Candace, she isn't stopping with Utah. She's already gearing up to bring a similar bill to Idaho next year. She also launched Dylan's Legacy, a nonprofit that's hosting a 2-day law enforcement training in Salt Lake City, Utah. This focuses on using location and app data in investigations, exactly the kind of tools that could have changed the course of Dylan's case. The training is led by Texas detective Aaron Benzik, who developed Badge Apps, a system designed to help officers quickly access and interpret digital data during investigations. Officers from across Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and more are expected to attend. Candace is hoping to get at least 4 officers from Utah, and she's actively looking for sponsors to help cover the $250 cost per officer. 3 years ago, from the recording of this episode on May 28, 2022, Dylan Round's life was cut short by violence. He was just 19, a young man chasing a dream out in the desert, building a life with his own 2 hands. And all of this was put to a tragic and unnecessary end. If you want to help or learn more, you can head to DylanRoundsLegacy.org. Please share today's episode on social media to continue to spread awareness about this case. And as always, we're so grateful for our Crime Salad Patreon and Apple subscribers. Your support means the world to us and helps us play our part in spreading awareness about these important topics. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.